Good evening, folks. It's Gardel here. I just want to get the camera on. There we go. As you can see from my dress, it's starting to chill down a bit in Cape Town. So, yeah, I can remember beginning the course with the sun catching me, and I had to sit a little bit back from where I sit, and now it's almost dark outside. Officially, this is our last session, but I want to do a bit of admin before we start with this session. I see from the program I worked out that I scheduled Shark Tank on I think it was the 28th of May. And I see that your finalists, I scheduled it before we had the final dates for the final POE delivery. I see the final date for the POE is the 4th of June. Now, I don't have any problems with starting Shark Tank on the 29th. I don't think we can, the 28th, I don't think we'll finish it in that evening. I suspect we're probably going to have a number of people that are going to say they would rather do it on the 31st, the Saturday. And I'm going to see what I can do to accommodate them. So I don't have a problem doing Shark Tank before the assignment is due. For some people, it might even be beneficial because they might get some feedback that can help them. But I am going to ask that if you guys as a class have a problem, drop me email, speak to me, let me know if you'd rather than say postpone Shark Tank, and then we're looking probably at doing Shark Tank then on the what would that be, the 11th of June, and then the Saturday following the 11th of June. Just so, yeah, that'll be the 11th and the 14th of June. Looking at your it's difficult to look at your timetables because, or the exam timetable, because everybody's on a different scheduling and different subjects and so on. I'm happy to do it on the date as I said, which would be the 28th of this month, and then the 30th, the Saturday. Hopefully we'll be able to finish in those 2 days. But I'm also happy to say start it on that Saturday after you've submitted, do it the next Wednesday, which would then be that Wednesday. Sorry, I'm struggling to get to my calendar. That would then be so you're submitting the 4th, so we can do a session on the Saturday, we can do a session on the 11th, and we can do a session on the 14th. Either or, I'm happy. Please let me know your thoughts on this. I prefer to do short. Yeah.
I would prefer to do it on the 28th, if that's possible.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Let's see what other people say. I know some people. I personally would prefer to do it before the time if I was a student, because I'd like to see if I can get some feedback. If somebody says, "Oh no, that's completely wrong," then at least I know when I hand in the final POE, I'm not on the wrong track. Others would rather complete the POE first, and then take from the POE. So we might then end up with, say, doing the 28th. And then possibly the 31st, and then possibly afterwards. Let's see what I will. I'm going to let I'm not going to make a commitment now. And I also don't want to say we will do it on the 28th and everybody will present that night. I want to be flexible because some people can't present on a Wednesday evening, and others can't present on a Saturday.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'll give some flexibility. I'm happy. It's going to take longer to complete the whole drama, but I'm happy to accommodate as many students as possible. I just want to do it. If we're going to do it Saturday, I'd prefer to just do 1, maybe 2 Saturdays. I don't want to do 3 Saturdays. So yeah, but drop me yourself as well. Please drop me an email, just so that I can get a sense and sort of try to put things together.
Okay. No
closer to the time, what I would do is, and I've just got to go check how we did it last time. I know once we did it and it worked really well, and once we did it and it was absolutely terrible. I will give you an electronic diary or an electronic place to complete and say when you want to be. So I'll give a time slot. I'll say on the 28th, we'll start at 6 and we'll end at 7. And we'll have 10 minutes or 15-minute time slots or whatever it's going to be. And you put your what time you would like to go in there. And then those people that don't react, I'll just put them into a time slot. I will also do a recording probably in the next weekend or so on the POE to do the briefing for the POE. If people want to start working, it's still quite a while away, but I know there might be other exams that you have to write and so on that's not a POE, so you might want to get ahead of the game. So I'll do a prep for that. Okay, right. Let's have a look at tonight. So tonight we're doing Learning Unit 6, Chapter 11. This is the one I was supposed to do 2 weeks ago, I think, and everything has gone pear-shaped. I had a bereavement in my family. It's not your problem, my problem, but unfortunately it has affected you. And I've decided to do Learning Unit 6 live for the simple reason that there's a question on this in the final POE. I think it's the last question in the POE. So I wanted to do this section. And this section is about, I'll put the learning outcomes there. There we go. This section is about accepting the fact that entrepreneurs do fail. We've got to understand that there is failure. It's a reality. And because it's a reality, we need to look at it and we need to, it'll be irresponsible of us to have an entrepreneurship course and not look at failure, not speak to students about failure. And in an interesting case around failure is if you go look at a guy like Richard Branson. Branson has had more companies fail than he's had companies that has worked. I've not looked at Elon Musk. I don't know how many companies he's had that failed or he's closed down. The problem is with Musk, he does things for tax reasons and so on. If you look at what he's done, what he did when he bought Twitter and then when he took X and he sold X, etc. There's a lot of movements there and failures there and things that have happened there that have got nothing to do with business, but that's got a heck of a lot to do with tax. But if you look at Branson, I mean, one of his biggest failures was Virgin Cola. And if you go look at how Virgin Cola and what Virgin Cola cost him before it was a failure, it's a really interesting fact that he has had so many failures. But as you'll see through tonight's lesson, the key is to stand up from that failure. So, okay, so yeah, failure is a reality for us as entrepreneurs. The idea for a failure or what failure is about is when an organization misses its goals, it fails to achieve the investor, whether the investor is external investors or it's yourself, their expectations, and the venture can basically not continue to operate. So the venture basically results in bankruptcy or liquidation. Now, there's a difference between bankruptcy and liquidation. Both end up in the same situation. In other words, all the assets are sold. The debts are paid with the monies that come in from the assets that are sold. And whatever's left over after debts goes back to the investors and the owners. The bankruptcy means your liabilities are more than your assets. So nothing comes back, and you still probably owe money, depending on, let's think about probably day one, year one, forms of ownership and liability in terms of forms of ownership. And then liquidation is basically liquidating the assets, meaning everything gets sold. But a business can fail, and then people can say, well, I'm liquidating my assets. People can also do voluntary liquidation, that they just decide, I want to liquidate the business, I'm not going to sell it. I was with one business, I was very close to just selling the assets and walking away, and then somebody walked through the door and said they want to buy, instead of buying the assets, they want to buy it as a going concern. And I sold basically for just more than what the assets were worth. I sold a going concern because the business wasn't doing very well. So it could be either forced or not. But the key thing here is that if you see failure as part of your entrepreneurial journey, and you learn lessons from it, you will bounce back quicker. If you the fear of failure, and we'll talk about fear of failure a little bit later, is a big thing. But once you've failed and you've bounced back from that and you've accepted it and you've come back and you've started a new business and that business is successful, then the fear starts to recede because you know what it feels like to fail. You know you can get through this and you know you can get to the other side of it. Although failure can be very traumatic, financially it can be very costly, and emotionally it can be painful. It's as I said, I've gone through the bereavement recently, so I know exactly what it feels like to lose a loved one, and for many people that's how it feels to lose their business. That it's like losing somebody or something that's really close to you, and people feel things like guilt. Um, they feel that they've done wrong, and failure isn't doing something wrong. And it gets worse if you know that you have squandered assets. For example, you've made sure that you get a massive salary all the time and so on. Then we start talking about the ethics of failure. So then it starts getting a bit dodgy. But the fact is, it can be quite traumatic for the entrepreneur. Reasons and why and how. Lack of market. The market doesn't really want your product, or poor marketing. My one business I know failed basically because poor marketing. By the time I realized that I'm not good at marketing and I should actually appoint somebody to do marketing, we were so far down the line that I couldn't turn the business around. And sometimes it's just loss of focus. Sometimes some entrepreneurs are such serial entrepreneurs that they start a business, the business looks okay, and it's starting to do okay, and then they start focusing on a new business. And then that business that they thought were doing okay starts to dwindle and so on because it's not getting the attention it needs to get. And pivots are the term that we use for turning those failing business around quickly. And a pivot is to take your business and just refocus it, to pivot away from that failure. If you've got a restaurant and the restaurant's not doing really well, pivot it away and make it into a coffee shop, right? So it's a shorter menu, it's easier, it's not as expensive, stock carrying isn't as much, you don't need as much staff. And then from there, people will then take the business and build it. For example, they'll start selling the actual house brand coffee to people. They'll start renting out coffee machines in offices, supplying the coffee. So the office rents the machine, plus they supply the house brand coffee to them. And suddenly you've got a business that works. So these pivots are important. And also having small failures. So small failures are very normal in any business. Whether it is the biggest, richest business in the world, in the country, or in your town, or it's one of the smallest businesses, small fails keep happening. The fact is, in many cases, small fails prevent big failures. So if you can pivot from those small things, make those directional changes, and pivots are things like where you can change your product, you can change your customer segment, you can change your revenue model, your distribution channel. All of these things that we've been talking about are all things that you make decisions on for your business. But when it starts going pear-shaped, those are the things that you can change. And suddenly the business changes. If you've decided your market segment is the middle class housewife, you might pivot away from that and go for the student market or for an upper class restaurant market, and suddenly your business change. So the small failures and things shouldn't be seen as catastrophic, but by the same token, you need to know when you can absorb a failure and continue, and when the failure is of such a nature that it's going to be a big failure if you don't pivot and if you don't switch something and change something. There's a failure spectrum now. I can't remember who did it. It's Harvard Business School, Edmondson. It was a lady, if I remember correctly. And she developed the failure spectrum. Now, the picture you have there, I know isn't very clear. If you're listening to the recording, maybe stop the recording, zoom a little bit. That is from the textbook, but I have got it. I'll explain what it says. So the idea is that, and I mentioned ethics earlier, that failure runs from blameworthy to praiseworthy failure. And depending on where on this failure spectrum it lays, it is either a positive or negative outcome for the business. And it gives reasons why failure has taken place. So we need to go into the detail of the spectrum. So starting on the one end is mismanagement, or defiance as they call it. This is where, you know, you've done ethical issues, you've gone over the legal boundaries even, and you've mismanaged the venture. You may have misrepresented the venture, and yeah, I almost want to say you failed because you cheated. The perfect example is there's a, and I'm not sure if I'm going to give examples for everyone, but the textbook formal example here is Theranos, I think it was called. I think that's the pronunciation. It's a company that said they've developed a blood test that can do all types of things from a single blood drop. And so they said that we've got the special machine we've developed. Give us a blood test, and we can do 240 different blood tests from a single drop of blood. And actually, they could do very few. And they used other machines for the other blood tests, and eventually they ended up simply making up various results. And you know, once it became public, the company just simply collapsed. I actually think there was a legal case eventually against them and so on. So yeah, that's the worst case. Then inattention, delegating too much too soon. So you've started your business, and the business is starting to run well, and now you're starting to give too much away from the business. So in other words, you're asking other people to do too much, or you've got a new business venture and you going in a new direction, and the other business is floundering. Now, I want to mention something here about delegating stuff. Many businesses, entrepreneurial businesses specifically, fail because of not delegating. So what happens is a business grows very quickly, and the owner, the owner, when I talk about the owner, I'm talking about the entrepreneur, tries to keep on running the business themselves. And they keep on trying to be the production manager, the HR manager, the finance manager, the procurement manager, the delivery guy, the salesperson, the admin assistant, the telephone answerer, and cook and bottle cleaner as well, for that matter. And then what happens is, then your inattention comes from not being able to get to everything, because you've not taken anybody else into your trust, and you've not said, look, I'm good at the production of this product, so I will focus on the production, but I'll get somebody else in who's good at sales, and they can sell the product, and I'll pay somebody to deliver it, rather than trying to do all of that stuff. Because when you try to do all of that stuff, you start to do everything badly, because you don't have enough time to do it. You're not paying it enough attention. And then you're in a spiral, and it's a downward spiral. And then you start getting behind, and then because you're trying to catch up on one thing, you're going to neglect something else even more. So that's another form of inattention that's dangerous. Then the third level, we're halfway through, I think, of the failure spectrum, is the lack of ability. You simply don't have the skill set. So you either overextended, and that's something that I was talking about that I linked to inattention, but it also goes into lack of ability, or you simply don't have the skills to get the job done. So, and many companies, when you start going into anything that looks vaguely technological, it's not difficult for you to outgrow your capacity or your technological knowledge quite quickly. Any technical thing. A friend of mine started developing websites, and he did quite well because he developed websites and so on. And then many of his clients started asking him to start developing online shops, not just a website. So websites for a company is one thing, but developing an online shop. And he started developing these things, and he realized, but the payment section of this is a difficult part for him with his almost 90% self-taught knowledge. And also it's a dangerous part because he could actually expose the companies to risk. And he got some, and I can't remember exactly, I'm not au fait with websites or development of websites, but he got some pre-packaged solution that he just said to customers, if you want an online shop, the purchasing part is handled by this software. If you don't want the software, you don't want to pay the software, I'm not interested. And because he realized he'd get to this point of lack of ability, and he would expose his clients. And then, of course, if you expose your clients to that type of situation, you're exposing yourself to a liability. Because if the clients get hacked or something like that, and their sales happen, but the money goes into a different bank account, you're going to be liable for that. And so he avoided this lack of ability by saying to his clients upfront, I've got a that area of the website, I'm running this way. You don't like that, find somebody else, because that's how I deal with it. Then you get something called process inadequacy. This is where you're running the company, but the processes and procedures and things that you put in place are not the correct ones. So communication starts breaking down amongst employees, and things start falling through the cracks, because and now we're starting to move towards the management side of things. Your management is not in the right the right level of management, correct management procedures. You've not made sure that all the things that you need to put in place are put in place, and they're the right things with the right checks and balances. Remember the old thing about planning, organizing, leading, and controlling? Typically on the controlling and control, you must remember, goes to planning, goes to organizing, goes to leading. And you might be lacking that control element or the correct control element, so you can't check that what you're doing is the right stuff. Then uncertainty, and this is lack of clarity, lack of confidence to a certain extent, where you're not sure where we're going, what's going to happen, and now you start making funny actions, and you start doing unreasonable things, because you're panicking. And then the last thing is exploratory experimentation, where you're doing market tests, and some of these tests will fail. You're taking things to market to test them. And you typically, remember, we do market testing to get very early feedback on our product, very early feedback on our service. So we take things to market that are probably not really market ready, but we want to test the market. We want to feel what the market says about this. And many of the funding websites are actually exploratory experimentation websites. Guys say, let's see, we put this out there. We say, guys, you want to buy this product? Give us funding. We'll make the product. And then they don't get enough funding. That's a failure. But that's a praiseworthy failure because you failed right at the beginning and you've actually tested to see, will this fail? Will this not fail? Can you imagine if you went and you made all of these products and you went through the whole process and spent all the money and now the market says, no, we're not interested? Rather put it on one of the funding websites where people give you money beforehand and you know, okay, I've got 1,000 orders, I've got enough money, and don't make a mistake. Most of those guys are building enough profit in there that they're going to do one of two things. They've decided beforehand that they're not going to continue further than making that batch of the product, or the profit will be enough to set them up so that they can get all the equipment and everything else they need so that they can continue to run with the product. So when you look at exploratory experimentation, it's a very important thing to do, actually, because it's crucial for your learning. It helps you to understand the market, understand your product, and understand whether the market wants your product. And if you fail, you fail. It's fine. It was an experiment. You pivot from there and you move on. And talking about failure, the fear of failure. So the whole idea of failure and the fear of it, the psychologist tells us it lies in parent-child relationships. So if a child was punished because they failed, because they didn't do well at school, if you're somebody like me that never worked hard at school and got punished, thankfully my parents weren't that bad with that, and then over and above that, if you're in the unfortunate position that when you are successful, you don't get much praise, that punish for failure, no praise for successful achievements, or being ambivalent or not saying anything when the child's successful, that grows the fear of failure. So there's a lesson for you when you have kids one day, or if you have kids already, that people, when you raise people that are taught that failure is not acceptable and you need to avoid it at all costs as a child in your sport, in your schoolwork, etc., then you don't develop that maturity, and you don't get the opportunity to grow and learn that failure is a thing that is actually acceptable. And that comes from your childhood. So actually what you should be doing is you should be seeing mistakes as opportunities to learn, and using the mistakes to improve your skills, or using that as an opportunity to compete against others. But if you are scared of that and you don't want to take any chances, then you not going to be able to growth and reach that maturity that you are happy to make mistakes, that you're not scared of making mistakes. And then even if you were taught that failure is fine, you still need to cope with failure, especially if it's not these small things that we spoke about right at the beginning. If it's a big failure and it's something that goes catastrophically wrong and you lose the whole business, you need to start looking at how do I cope with this. So the first thing that you can do is you can reframe your goals. So change the goals, make them more achievable, so for example, if you said this company is going to be fully operational, fully profitable within 3 months, maybe 6 months, that might be a better idea to do rather than going for the short term. So secondly, if you have a product that failed, or it's not generating as much revenue as you like, or it's not getting the market penetration or whatever, don't take it personally. Look at the facts. Why did this fail? What are the reasons behind it? Because if you take it personally, you're never going to look at the facts. It's always going to be your fault, and it's always going to be your problem. You are the one that caused this. Yes, you might have caused it by looking at the market wrongly or something like that, but see it in terms of the facts. Don't internalize it as a personal problem of yourself. And then expose yourself to it. Feel the fear. Because when we feel the fear diminishes. I saw a clip the other day. I can't remember if it was on Facebook or TikTok or wherever. I know those things are old school, and you guys have all moved on, but I'm older, so I can still get stuck in history. And it was a clip of a guy that was doing a base jump, a tandem base jump. So he was strapped on the front of a guy, and the guy had like the camera, and they were standing on the edge of the cliff, and he asked him, "What do you feel like?" And this guy could just stammer out, "I am very scared." He didn't use the word very. And then the guy, the base jumper he was strapped to, said to him, "Okay, count down from 3 to 1, and after you say 1, you jump. Start now." And he sort of forced him to do this. And so the guy said 3, 2, 1, and he jumped. The two of them jumped, and off they went, and screaming and shouting and everything. And I mean, it's 30 seconds and they're on the ground. And he asked the guy, "So how do you feel now?" He says, "That was incredible. I can face anything, and we can go straight up there. I want to jump again now." And that's because he faced that fear, he experienced the fear, he embraced the fear, and thought, "Geez, okay, I can handle this." And that's something that we need to think about doing in the business world. Then the last thing in terms of developing coping strategies is that go speak to people that have failed, that have gone wrong. Find role models and speak to those people, and then ask them to tell you how they dealt with it. And if needed, ask them to help you deal with your fear and tell you how you can cope with the current fear that you have and the current situation, and let them almost talk and guide you through that fear. In general, so when we're talking about fear of failure, we don't have to worry about it as it's a strange thing. There's a global, what's GEM? I can't remember what GEM stands for, but it's a global measurement of the fear of failure. Global Entrepreneur Monitor does a fear. The GEM is the Global Entrepreneur Monitor. And this is a report that does a lot of things, but amongst others, they measure the fear of various countries. And this is an interesting thing, that countries differ because the fear of failure somehow it could be not genetic but cultural. So they look at how people's personal perceptions influence their decisions to look at businesses and so on. So they look at perceived opportunities, how people see if there's opportunities around them to start a business, how much capabilities do you have, the skills, the knowledge and things to start a business yourself, the actual fear of failure, are you constrained by your own fear, and then do you have any intentions of starting a business? And they measured over a long period. They actually asked people over a period of 3 years. And the most recent stats tell us that Angolans, and I've dealt with quite a lot of Angolan students on the Cape Town campus, and they've got the least amount of fear. We're looking at about 16% of fear to start a business. And when you speak to Angolans, they are quite entrepreneurial. I've had really young students that have done very interesting stuff, entrepreneurial stuff. I had 2 students, they couldn't have been older than about probably 22. And they were exporting tomatoes from Cape Town to Luanda via cooled trucks, so trucks that have got coolers on them, and they were trucking truckloads of tomatoes that they bought in the Cape Town market up to Luanda. And this they were doing as 22, 23-year-olds, which I found quite amazing at the time. Then countries like Colombia are very low. Morocco and Greece are at the higher end. We're talking Morocco is like 64% fear of starting. Greece is at 57. India is at 50. South Africa is quite high up. We're at 44%. So we're not over the 50. And in part, that 44% fear of failure, fear of starting a business, is possibly the reason why our entrepreneurial scores are so low, why we don't have more entrepreneurs in South Africa. So yeah, we spoke about it earlier, that you need to learn from these failures. That you need to, if you have failed, it's important for you to learn from that and use that experience as almost as an experiment, and to see failure as an intentional iteration. So iteration is prototyping, redoing something in a different way, and then redoing it again and redoing it better. So, and the idea is, what they're saying is, don't call it failure, call it intentional iteration. In other words, see it as a process where you're prototyping, testing, analyzing, refining even, and then failing and using those in what the textbook calls intelligent failure. So fail, but what do I learn about it? How do I stride ahead of the competition? Do I do things like design a new product? Do I look at a different way of using my product? And as you fail, you see that as a deliberate moment to try to do a new business, to change the way you operate your business, to change the way your product functions. And in that manner, it actually, if you go for this idea of intentional iteration rather than failure, it actually becomes a positive, because it creates new opportunities within your business. Something else that's important is, if you've got a big organization, so it's you and you've got a couple of people, a blame-free culture is essential. You can't have a culture where if anything goes wrong, the first thing you're looking for is blaming somebody. I saw a classic example of that this morning in a newspaper. And I can't remember unfortunately, which hospital it was. Somebody in a hospital, a government hospital, wrote a letter to the newspaper saying that in this specific hospital, there's serious problems because in the high care unit, there are not enough nursing staff and not enough doctors, which means that patients, and they laid out the figures to show that it's true, that the patients are in being placed at risk. And almost immediately, the hospital and the health department behind the hospital issued a statement that they're busy with an investigation to find out who the person is that wrote this report to the newspapers. Now, that's a blaming environment. What they should have been saying is they're busy with an investigation to find out if this is really true and if it is actually placing the patients at risk. So a blame-free culture is something that you need to encourage, because then people are happy to fail and they accept failure. I've mentioned to you before, Richard Branson once said when somebody made a very big mistake in one of his companies and it cost them £1 million or £2 million, and he had a press conference about it, and people asked him, has he fired the person that made the mistake? And Branson said, no, I've just paid £1 million to train the person. And that's an absolutely blame-free environment that's saying, if you make a mistake, you learn from the mistake and we move on from that. As long as we learn from that and we recover from that failure. And then employees are encouraged to take chances. They feel that they can try new things. And then also then you probably as a team look more closely what went wrong, why did it go wrong, and then the team learns from this. And this, all of this can only happen if there's clear communication. If you have got communication on what is acceptable, what can we let go, and also what is unacceptable. Because even in a culture like this, if people are doing reckless things, if people are violating laws, if people are being negligent, they willfully wasting resources, that will not be acceptable, right? But if people are experimenting to try to find ways to do things that are actually working in the favor of the company and is actually contributing to the bottom line of the company, then that should be acceptable, even if it is a failure. But if it's a failure that we can learn something from, and that if it's a failure where we can actually say, guys, you know what, we can pivot from this, we can learn from this, we can take this failure, we build on this, and we're going to make a bigger failure if the next one doesn't work, but it's going to get us closer to our final goal. Then it's fine. So you've got to communicate what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And now we're getting into the last section of this chapter, which is building grit. So there's this idea that talent predicts achievement. If you do some kind of IT school or a aptitude test or something, it's a predictor of achievement. This is actually not true. To some extent, it'll show you some kind of what is the potential for achievement, but it won't tell you that the person can achieve or not. Testing has shown that grit is the actual true determinant of success or not. And grit is a quality that enable people to work hard and sustain interest in their long-term goal. In other words, it's that tenacity to continue to work towards what you trying to achieve, and this has to do with your mindset. If you've got a fixed mindset, meaning you can't adapt, and you believe that and intelligence and talent is something you were born with, you have it or you don't have it, and because you believe you have it, you'll avoid failure, you're not going to get far. But if you've got a growth mindset that says, I've got a certain amount of talents that I'm born with, I can develop these talents further, I can work hard, I can learn, I can dedicate myself to what I want to achieve, then you probably will get a hell of a lot further. And they talk about deliberate practice, which is a conscious effort to practice the things that we can't yet do. In other words, you actively seek out the things that you need to do, and you then learn how to do them. Now, in my friend's case, the guy I spoke about earlier with the website, if he had worked on understanding how to program the sales side of a website, he could have done a lot more business, right? Because now he doesn't need to use a third-party service. He also doesn't have to say, clients, I can't help you because you're not prepared to pay for that service. You could say, look, this is my quote and I give you everything. It's not, this is my quote to develop that part of the website. You also need to pay for this side so that you can make some money out of the website. So the whole idea of grit is that you've got tenacity and you strive to achieve the goals. And once again, there's ways to build grit. Courage, right? You shouldn't have a fear of failure. You should attempt to do what you set out to do. And failure shouldn't prevent you doing this, or fear of failure shouldn't prevent you from doing this. Conscientiousness. So even when you've got when there's challenges, you continue to work. You know what your long-term goals are that you want to achieve, and you work towards them. And conscientiousness is working towards them, and perseverance is continuing to work towards them, even in the face of difficulty. And then you get resilience. And resilience is where you have failed and recovering from that failure, overcoming those obstacles, and continuing to strive after those goals. The idea is that you sort of say everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not right yet, it's not the end yet. Right? So I'll get there. The route that I'm going to get there is not a straight line, but it will be all right when I get there. And if it's not all right, I'm not there yet, so continue to work hard. And then striving for excellence, meaning that your skills you're always enhancing, you're always trying to do better, and that's an ongoing process. We can never say I'm now the best I'm ever going to be. Because you can always learn something more. You can always find a different way, a better way, a cheaper way to do something. And then lastly, remove the stigma from failure. It's important to understand that failure is going to happen. And if we are not able to remove that stigma, we will continue to be fearful of it. There's all types of things that people do. There's competitions, fail fairs, where people actually participate and openly and honestly discuss their failures and say to people, I tried this and this is how I failed. Because if you can explain how you failed, if you can tell people why you failed, it not only removes the stigma from failure, but people learn how not to fail because they learn how you failed. And if they know how you failed, they know what they shouldn't do so that they don't fail. Guys, that's what I have for you tonight in terms of failure. I think failure is such an interesting topic, and it's such a, if you can talk about failure and openly say, I didn't get this right, and I know these are the reasons why I didn't get this right. Not only do you learn, but other people learn from your mistakes as well. And I think that's a brilliant way to look at it, that one of the reasons why we need to talk about our failure and be open about our failure, we need to help others not to fail, not to fail. And thank you for the comments, guys. I'm glad you enjoyed the session. Are there any questions, anything else you want to ask me before I say to you good night and enjoy your evening? Okay, I'll take that as a no. I don't see anybody typing. Thanks, Romy. I see you say all okay. Okay, thanks, guys. Have a lovely evening. And please let me know, also those that are only listening to this recording, please, in the next couple of days, I need to know, like by Monday, where we are in terms of Shark Tank and how you want to proceed. And then I'll drop you guys a mail and so on. I'll also drop you a reminder of the recording, so of the recording for the POE, so you know what the final POE and what you're supposed to do around that. And also I will, closer to the time, whenever the first Shark Tank session is, I probably won't include it in the briefing for the POE, but I'll also do a separate briefing for Shark Tank to explain to you what you need to do, how you need to do it, and so on. Okay, guys, that's enough. Have a good evening. Cheers. Speak soon. Bye.